Hi guys, my name is Brady and I'll be your host for the day. So welcome back. I was thinking, sometimes, of course, whenever you have creative freedom, it's always fun to get creative with your scenes, creative with your style, your tactics, your techniques, whatever it is that you're shooting. It's always fun to get creative and try new things. And that's exactly what I went for with this project. So what we're looking at here, it's a chess scene. You've got this warm, low, dark lighting, obviously a night interior. It's nothing crazy. None of the shots are too extensive at all. They're all pretty simple. So what I want to do is go through the lighting as well as some of the creative camera twists that I took to get some of this stylized look. Now the first shot I want to dive into is hands down my favorite, and immediately you're going to see that Danny here is sitting. We've got the straight on shot, he's playing chess with himself. Now the first thing that might stick out to you is this incredibly weird focus plane, which I want to get to a little bit later in the video on how exactly I did that, but ultimately I did this creative decision. Again, I experimented, I played around with things because I knew that he was playing himself, so I wanted to give this feeling of we're almost in one brain as far as when Danny's making the move, then when he's making the opposing player's move, we're almost in a different brain. So having this altered focus plane, so it's shifting almost to like a ghost player's mindset or a ghost player's focus is the intention that I had. Super weird, definitely experimental, but I think I like it. It was fun to do. So I'm gonna get later on in the video in detail on how I got this look, but moving forward to the lighting, that's what I want to cover first. And again, going for the lighting, it's very simple. There isn't a lot of extensive thought going into it. It's ultimately just two lights. So again, I apologize if there is some wind coming in here. I'm shooting outside because it's gorgeous and I'm in Vermont. Doesn't matter. So the first light that I added was this overhead light. I wanted kind of just a soft ambient warm light. So I did that by rigging up an Amaran F22C overhead with some diffusion and then an egg crate as well. Now I rigged this up on a boom arm that I got from B&H. I'm going to link that down below. And then additionally with the diffusion and the egg crate, I put the diffusion on this F22 and then the egg crate as well to keep the light isolated onto the table, onto the chessboard, that area where Danny is. I did not want the light to spill throughout the entire room. Now, with just this one light in place, we've got this really nice contrast ratio, and I didn't do that from just throwing the light up there and just saying, ta-da. I actually took this light on the boom arm and brought it back a little bit. So we're coming from the back direction of Danny, but obviously still very toppy. And I did that because with the light coming onto the front side of him, you're gonna start to fill in all the shadows on the front side, and then you're not really gonna get this really nice highlight to shadow roll off. So we aren't completely backlit with the scene. Obviously you can see the table is very well lit, Danny is very well lit, but we're just pulling the boom arm back a little bit relative to the camera, so it's starting to be backlit and creating this shadow contrast as it comes around his face. It's really the same concept as front lighting. You're not just gonna front light your subject because it's gonna wash away all the shadows. You're gonna bring the light back to the side or some direction to get this contrast ratio. So I brought the light still toppy, but back a little bit to still retain the same contrast. And then the light I put to 2700 Kelvin because I wanted this warm tungsten look, but my camera was set to 4000 white balance just to still retain some of this warm characteristics of the F22. Now that's the first light, that's the key light, that's really the main source into this scene. Now before we add into the next light, I wanna talk about two additional practicals. And if you're unfamiliar with the term practical, it essentially means any light that is going to be just in frame. So you can see that you've got this Edison bulb on frame left and this candle on frame right. Now I added those in the background just to add a little bit more depth and visual interest and also motivate a little bit more ambience throughout the room. And then with the quarter strength black pro mist that I had on the front of the lens, it added a really nice glow and just like this really nice filmic look to both of these in-frame practicals, giving us one, visual interest, and two, a little bit more depth into the frame, and then three, motivation for our second light source. Now looking especially on frame right, it was just really dark. We had these very dark curtains and everything was just falling into black, and I wanted to boost that level up a little bit more. Nothing drastic, but I wanted to bring some level in there, but do it in a way that was natural. So now I saw that we had this candle acting as a practical in frame. Well, I wanted to motivate a little bit more light based off of that. So the next light I took was an Amaran F22X, their bicolor 2x2 version, and I put that just open face right on the floor, and I just put down a layer of diffusion on top of it just to cut some of the harshness of the LED, of the individual LED diodes. But I went into Sidus Link and I set that to the fire mode just to get a little subtle warm flicker motivated from this candle. So now you're seeing a very dim light coming up on the curtains, from below, from on the floor, just adding a little bit more level and interest in the back. Less is more, especially when adding accent lights. You don't want it to be overpowering. I just wanted a subtle glow as if it were coming from the candle or maybe that Edison bulb on the frame left. Now that's it for the first shot, at least. That's all it was. Like I said, it wasn't extensive. I wanted to keep the focus on Danny as he's playing chess and not throughout the entire scene. Now, coming into the next scene, I've got this very tight shot of the chess piece sliding across the board. This one was fun. We've got this little A and B rack focus of the piece across the board coming in to knock out, I think it was the queen, if I remember correctly. And essentially what I did for this camera-wise is had my FX6 on a fluid head tripod, and I had a 50mm vintage prime on that. And I just panned left as it came in there, and I tracked it and marked this A and B point and just rack focused with my fingers. And then as it came across, I just tracked the piece. So very simple camera movement, but then as for the lighting goes, everything stayed remotely the same. But just to add a little bit more contrast to these pieces, to the board, I brought the F22C, that overhead light, down as far as I could before it got into the frame, just to give a little bit more backlit feel, adding a lot of contrast on the front side of the pieces and across the board, because otherwise it'd be very flat and washed out, and I still wanted to retain some of the contrast. Now, since I brought this F22 down in height, I also had to bring down in output the exposure that was coming out of it, because it's getting a lot closer to the subject, so be mindful when moving in lights, just to bring down the exposure, or when moving out lights to bring up the exposure and output from these light sources. And then the practicals in the F22X that were in the background, I didn't even touch, I just left them exactly where they were. Now, that's two shots down. There's one other shot that I want to talk about, and that's just this really close up on Danny's eye. Really, I wanted to just get in his brain and make it feel like as if we were thinking what he was thinking. Very focused. So to do that, we moved in very close, and I actually stripped down the key light, that F22C that we had, and I opted to go for this cove light of unbleached muslin, so wrapping this cove light around and then using an aperture 300X, again a bicolor light, still at 2700 Kelvin, bouncing into this cove, giving us this very large wrap of light around his face, since we really wanted this soft detail on his face. And then also with this cove of light, I took the blanket or the muslin and I rested it down on the table as well. And I did that because I knew he was going to be looking down. So if we just had a light coming from this forward direction, we'd probably start to get a little of a raccoon eye shadow and these shadows on his neck. So by bouncing and wrapping this light from the underside, we're going to be filling in all of this shadow area, his under eye, his under chin as well. So that's why I opted to go for this big cove setup, just to get a very, very soft wrap of light on this tight shot. Now, I mentioned that I was shooting on vintage primes, and being a close shot, vintage primes don't typically have a close focus distance. But I wanted to get that. Now, if I had a diopter, that would have probably changed everything, but I did not have a diopter. Diopters will help focus a lot closer, especially used with anamorphic lenses. But again, I didn't have it on hand, so something I wouldn't necessarily suggest to any of you out there, but I was feeling risky. I took the lens off the mount and I pulled it away from the sensors. So now by doing that, it's gonna travel further, this pretty much light that's coming through your lens, it's gonna travel further, giving you a closer focusing distance. I don't know the photo science on that necessarily, but I know that it worked. Of course, the sensor was open and exposed, which is why I don't recommend it to you. But there was no wind, there was nothing, dust flying around, none of that. So I was like, you know what? Let's do it for the shot. Why not? I was feeling crazy, and I loved the way it looked. And then looping back around to the first shot where the focus plane tilted. It had this tilt shift kind of look. Now, there's a tilt shift lens where you can actually turn the front element of the lens to change this focus plane as to where it hits the sensor. But again, I did not have that either. So what I did, risky business, I took the lens off of the camera and I actually just tilted the lens. So by tilting it, you're changing where this focus plane is going onto the sensor. So instead of being like this, if you tilt the lens, it's going to come in from at an angle, and this focus plane is now going to be kind of altered, which is why Danny was in focus and the opposing side of the chessboard was out of focus. Again, big disclaimer, don't do this, especially if you're renting gear or it's not your gear, but I was feeling risky and feeling crazy, and I liked the creative look that we were getting out of it, and I was feeling experimental. So I'm going to have to end it with that. It's gorgeous out. It's actually pretty warm, but you know, I'm staying cool because I've got this Cuts t-shirt. It's a Pima cotton t-shirt. I'm going to link everything down below, but essentially the Pima cotton is just this really high-grade material that feels loose, and it almost feels like it's always staying cool on me. So when I'm out in sunny areas, as we're getting into the summer, I've been wearing these more and more. They come in a variety of different colors like this blue, and use code BradyBissett to get 15% off, or just follow the link that is down below. But with that being said, I am going to drink this coffee, have a glass of water, and I miss you guys. And that's all. Anyway, I hope you're doing fantastic. I'll get back onto a regular schedule as soon as I can. And at this point, I'm just rambling because I like talking to you guys, but really I'm just talking to a camera in the backyard. So, with that being said, sayonara. I'll see you later. That wind feels absolutely amazing. Yes, it does. I'm just going to sit here and relax. Anyway, bye.